Is Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart a realistic option for the New Orleans Saints in the 2025 NFL Draft? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu. And as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Fickner, injury lawyers. If you're injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore, Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Saints have a lot of decisions to make for this offseason, whether it's free agency and obviously the upcoming NFL draft, because if the Saints are going to get out of the hole that they're currently in, got to start drafting better. And for this Saints team, they got positional needs everywhere, right? I think when you go into the draft, obviously you're going to see whether it's ESPN, NFL Network, they're going to put up needs for the Saints. You might as well just put up everything, because I can make an argument they need another wide receiver, another running back, more offensive linemen, definitely need a few defensive linemen, another corner, 2 safeties, maybe a younger linebacker. Obviously the biggest position to neglect over here out of this rant that I start off with, the quarterback spot. And the Saints, obviously, with all the reports surrounding Derek Carr, it seems like you maybe ride out another year with Derek Carr. But I said when that news was first announced that they plan on restructuring or reworking his contract so he'll be on the roster for next season, that doesn't stop you from drafting a quarterback. The question would be, are the quarterbacks in this class worth it for the Saints, and at what spot in the draft? So we know Cam Ward's the top guy. We know Shador's considered QB2. Let's put them out of the equation for a sec, although I'm not ready to completely rule out those possibilities for 2 reasons. One, the Saints did meet with Cam Ward, so who knows? Maybe they're thinking about moving up, although that would be such an expensive move for a franchise that I don't think this is the time to do it. I've been a big proponent of, if you believe someone's a franchise quarterback, there's not a price, that's too steep. But the Saints are in a weird spot right now where I kind of feel like maybe you hold on to some chips if you're not certain. Shedeur Sanders, the hype surrounding him has diminished a little bit. And, I never felt that he was a top 10 prospect in this year's draft class. It doesn't mean that Shedeur can't be a good quarterback. I think Shedeur is a great processor. I think he's very good at just, reading the defense well, making the accurate throws, keeping it moving. I don't know if he has an A-plus trait, but there's some quarterbacks that don't, and they still thrive in this league. But I don't know if Shedeur is going to be a top 5 pick, like everyone may think. I don't know if he's going to be top 7, and there is a realistic chance he falls to 9, so that's why I wouldn't rule him out. But the guy I want to focus on for today is Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss. And it's so weird because coming into college, I thought Jaxson Dart was going to be a star. I remember interviewing him coming out of high school, and which feels weird because I feel still somewhat young in myself. But Jaxson Dart, I remember talking to him coming out of high school when he was the Gatorade Player of the Year for his class, and he had that kind of moxie to him. He had the arm talent. You go to USC, you think that's the perfect spot for him to thrive, and instead, ends up moving to Ole Miss, obviously with Lane Kiffin. Those two work out pretty well, and Jaxson Dart was a fine college quarterback. I don't think this is, an indictment on his game where you look at his tape and say, man, I don't see anything there that's worth working with. But Jaxson Dart, I think there was always a little bit more meat left on the bone in terms of what I think he could have accomplished due to his talents, because he does throw the ball with a lot of zip. I do believe he's got the athleticism in today's NFL that you need from your quarterbacks, because you don't necessarily need your quarterback to be a runner, but man, they got to have some athleticism. They got to have some escapability to them. Jaxson Dart definitely has it. Had over 400 rushing yards last season for the Rebels. The question is, at pick 9, is it too rich for the Saints' blood? Personally, I don't know. I kind of think it is too rich. I've been a big believer in saying, guys like Will Johnson, even McMillan, if Mason Graham falls, I think he'd be a great pick at number 9. So part of me feels like you could get a blue chip prospect. At number 9, maybe Jaxson Dart's too rich, but I know how the quarterback market works. And I know that if your idea is, hey, you pick a good player at 9 and maybe you come back around and get that guy, you don't really fuck around with the quarterback position. And for people thinking, why not? Just go back to last year's draft, right? The Broncos took Bo Nix, and everyone was like, could have got Bo Nix later. Are you sure about that? Now, Denver, after 1 year, probably feels pretty vindicated. I thought Bo had a really nice rookie season, and he was ascending by week to week. but teams don't really play around with the quarterback position. The only real example I think you could see where teams really did play around was Lamar Jackson. And that was a rare case. And guess what? All 31 other teams that played around, they got burnt. So, I don't see that happening again. But here's what I like about Jaxson Dart. A, I do think he has the measurables that you need. B, I talked about the escapability. I think that's important. But C, and this is where I believe there's going to be a lot of chatter between the Saints and Jaxson Dart. He views himself as a Jalen Hurts type quarterback. That's who he models his game after. Measurable wise, he showed it at the combine over the weekend. Him and Hurts, measurable wise, are very similar. Kellen Moore just came from working with Jalen Hurts. They just had a lot of success, obviously, being part of a Super Bowl run. If he wants to stick to that type of quarterback, that might be your segue. A Jaxson Dart who's very similar. Even their throwing mechanics are awfully similar, which is crazy to think. But is it too much? That's going to be the question. But I do believe there's hype there. There's been a lot of rumors about Kellen Moore possibly liking him. And the Saints being linked to Jaxson Dart stems back to the Senior Bowl. Now that they officially have Kellen Moore as a head coach, the rumors get a little bit louder as to who they may like at quarterback. And if they like a quarterback, would this be the guy? So those are all variables to take into consideration. I don't know if I see Jaxson Dart and think, oh, he could be a superstar. Personally, I don't. But I've been wrong before. A lot of us have been wrong. And I think it's funny when it comes to quarterback classes, you'll hear this isn't a great quarterback class. And I get that. But I remember just a couple of years ago, we were talking about Trevor Lawrence's draft class and the quarterback talent and saying, man, this could be a generational quarterback class. Trevor Lawrence, we thought he'd be the next guy up. Justin Fields thought he'd be a star. Trey Lance, people thought he'd be a star. Mac Jones thought he'd be, at the very least, a really good quarterback, had a nice rookie season and obviously plummeted down the hill. Zach Wilson, star talent, flamed out. He's already on his second team. So we've seen great quarterback classes flop before. Now, we've seen the occasional bad quarterback classes not produce. I remember back to Kyler Murray's class. Outside of Kyler Murray, you're kind of grasping at straws. Daniel Jones, no. Drew Lock, no. I believe, unfortunately, Dwayne Haskins wasn't that class, the late Dwayne Haskins. We'll never really know what Dwayne could have been, but that class struggled. I think Gardner Minshew is one of the few guys that's really had a nice long runway there. And even him, what's the ceiling? So it's possible that this class that's been ruled a bad quarterback class ends up exceeding expectations. But the question will be for the New Orleans Saints. Do you believe Jaxson Dart is unequivocally going to be the guy? If the answer is no, you just don't take him at 9. I think it's that simple. If you have conviction in the pick and you pick him at 9, yes, there's going to be blowback. Yes, there's going to be a ton of pressure. But if the coach who's coming in, who needs his quarterback to operate his system, believes this guy's going to do it at a high level, you got to have faith as a fan base. And you also have to feel like, hey, this is the opportunity here. The moment that Saints fans have been asking for, new coach, new quarterback, having a new era to kind of start Saints football and head in a different direction. So that's where I'm at. It's a very easy answer to give. It's a cop-out type answer, but that's where I'm at. I don't see Jaxson Dart and see top 10 pick. I don't. But we were just a year removed from Bo Nix being drafted in the top 15, people ridiculing the Denver Broncos, and Bo Nix playing his goddamn ass off and looking like a really good quarterback, especially in the second half of the season. So do I think the Saints are going to take Jaxson Dart at 9? No. Do I believe it's a possibility? Do I believe the chatter's getting a little bit louder on that front and maybe that happens? Sure. And that's where it really lies for this Saints team. So how much conviction do you have in this quarterback and whether or not he can be good? If you have a lot, I say you go for it. If not, there's a lot of other positions that the Saints can address in the upcoming draft. So we'll see what happens for New Orleans, but it's going to be a fascinating one. As always, guys, though, I want to know what you think about Jaxson Dart. Is it one of those players where you don't want him on the board at all? Or is it one of those situations where pick 9, absolutely not, but maybe later on in the draft you would consider? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, guys, subscribe to Boo Crew Media for more content here. We got you covered for the Pelicans and Saints. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for the Straight Up Saints content here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.